everybody's angel who made heaven a place on earth. Heaven a place on earth. Heaven is a place. Heaven is a place on earth. Oh no. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Another lovely day as the children play. I think to myself whenever we're together, heaven is a place on earth. And there's a sunny sky. I know the reason why. With you by my side, no matter what the weather, heaven is a place on earth. I used to be lonely, thinking life was only headed for a bitter end. And then you came along singing your song and showing me how heaven begins. Oh yeah. I used to be lonely, thinking life was only headed for a bitter end. And then you came along singing your song and showing me how heaven began. Oh yeah. Now as we grow old, the stories will be told of our happy love and everybody's angel who made heaven a place on earth. Heaven a place on earth. Heaven is a place. Heaven is a place on earth. Oh no. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Another lovely day as the children play. I think to myself whenever we're together, heaven is a place on earth. And there's a sunny sky. I know the reason why. With you by my side, no matter what the weather, heaven is a place on earth. I used to be lonely,
It's a
thinking
place
life was
on
only headed for a bitter end. And then you came along singing your song and showing me how heaven begins. Oh yeah. I used to be lonely, thinking life was only headed for a bitter end. And then you came along singing your song and showing me how heaven began. Oh yeah.
Erika,
Hi, can you hear me okay? I just fogged out my glasses.
I can hear you.
Alright, I can hear you as well.
Sweet.
Perfect. Awesome. How are you?
I'm so good. It's stoked to have you on here.
Hey, I'm excited to be here.
I'm like super green with this streaming stuff, so I'm panicking.
Yeah, I've never used this. I've never used this system.
Yeah, I mean, you know who uses this is flipping Pine Creek.
Oh yeah. That's right. I mean, I'm not used to streamers.
Oh boy, see, I'm already having like problems.
Oh no.
Of course, right?
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
Oh,
Nothing can go right. Are we doing this live, by the way, or are we doing a recording?
This is live.
All right, cool.
Oh, hey, I see you now. In the stream thingy.
Good.
Holy smokes.
100 people in
This just might work.
Oh my gosh. Can you
That
go
would
to,
be-
like, in one of these rooms at once?
All right, well, I think we're good to go. Holy smokes. One thing I can't figure out though is like, you can just like see my house.
Hmm.
How do I make it so you can just see the green screen? Or like, how can I do effects on this whole thing? I don't know.
I don't know.
Without doing like a virtual camera but then, I got a laptop, it probably would explode.
Yeah. I have no idea. No clue.
But you got a nice background. You got some shells and
Got my-
skulls and
I got my little galaxy background in there
what
too.
a lovely room of death.
It is a lovely room. Well, to be fair, most of it is plaster. Most of it is a replica.
Oh, really?
But there is some bone up there too.
I was having arguments with my children about this a while ago. Like, they think that the bones are real or the bones are fake. What are they? Are they real or fake? Like in the museums, I mean.
It depends on the bones. It depends on the museum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sometimes they use sometimes you get casts, and sometimes it's the original.
Oh, snap.
Occasionally too, if it's a really, really rare fossil, they'll cast it anyways because they don't want the original being out in a place where it can get messed with. You know? So they
hi.
stash it in the underground.
Sorry, my wife just walked in. She didn't know I was doing this. I abandoned my children to the electronic babysitter, and they're hanging out.
How old are your kids?
I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh. What a range.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
They're maximally mischievous.
Yeah, and my 4-year-old's just fallen in love with Star Wars.
Oh no, that's nice though. That's nice.
He loves
That's not a bad like fandom to pick.
No, it's funny though because have you ever seen that? It's bad lip reading, and it's Yoda, and he does the little song about the seagulls poking his knees and all that.
Yeah, yep. I remember bad lip reading was. Gosh, I saw that video several years ago. Now that's an oldie but goodie.
Yeah, it's real old, and it's funny though because that was his first like exposure to episode 4, so he thinks that's literally what it is. He hasn't seen episode 4 yet, so he's gonna be surprised when we actually watch it, and he doesn't sound like that.
Yeah, he's gonna be like, "This is not what I remember."
No, he's gonna be. Hopefully, he doesn't hate me for that.
No.
Anyway, Star Wars aside, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. You're a superstar in my mind, the modern day community.
I'm happy to be here. I just like to debate creationists as well.
Oh, I know, and you are one of the best at it. I know that you like recently kind of had a lot of fire on from SFT and all that. What's the deal with that?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, he's upset. A couple months ago, we've been going back and forth with videos for quite some time. Him making claims and then me taking the video and saying, "Hey, here's the issues with this." And at one point, eventually, I was like, I'm very sick and tired of presenting a criticism of a given argument that he's using, only to have that criticism ignored and the premise reasserted without any alterations. So I made that was I just titled something like I'm probably done with these creationists, in which I was like, here's the list of questions that I have for you, and until you can answer these, at least attempt to answer them, I'm not interested in engaging any further. And those questions have not been answered. like to my satisfaction, as in a couple of them have been attempted, but they've basically been a reassertion of the premise again. And I stipulated in that video, it can't just be, premise again. It's like he says A, I say A can't be true because B, and then he says A again. That's not how this works. And then on top of that, this individual's behavior grew increasingly erratic, increasingly needlessly aggressive towards myself and towards other people. And it became abundantly clear that the only reason why there was politeness and civility in the first place was to use me and my channel to boost his and his channel.
I
right?
see.
Him and that's why he's pivoted to doing a lot of debates on his channel, because he's trying to lure bigger names onto his channel so that he can lure with them their followers and potentially get subscribers.
Right.
The idea that myself and many others that he has wronged are kind of holding. A lot of us have been like, look, this is not a person that we want to engage with, because in addition to all of that, his partner in crime, Raw Matt, is an anti-vaxxer. He's a former breatharian. He's just a wacky dude. And
He's
I'm not
a what?
interested.
Breatharian?
A breatharian.
What does that mean?
Former breatharian. He used to be a part of what is essentially a cult, a diet cult, if you will, where you get all of your nutrients from breathing, like a plant does. They called themselves breatharians. You can find a lot of YouTube videos.
SpongeBob filter feeding?
Yeah, like photosynthesis. Yeah,
Whoa.
exactly. Yeah, it was a really weird. I don't think he was a breatharian for very long, but this was espoused like on his website. Like none of this is speculation. This is stuff that he put out there, in the present and in the past. So myself and my colleagues on YouTube, my friends on YouTube, we were all like, we're not interested in platforming the behavior. We're not interested in platforming the weird views, as distant as they may be. And while Standing may not hold those views himself, he platforms people who do, and I'm not okay with that. And then he also hasn't answered my question. So there's 3 big reasons why I am not interested in engaging with him as a person, and that hurts his feelings.
Because then you just get, you get portrayed as running away, right? That's his latest thing,
Yeah, I don't understand what that's all about. Like I go on debate channels all the time. The only thing I request is a neutral platform.
Well, it's an easy escape for him to just, not answer the questions and still get a shot in. She's running away. She can't, it's kind of cheap.
Yeah, well, and anyone who's been keeping up with this can keep track of what happened when, right? So like he would come up onto my videos and say, David McQueen wants to debate you, or what's the other guy? The Indiana Joseph Hubbard wants to debate you, or whatever. And I would say back in the comments or via email, which again, I've got receipts for all of this, as I showed in one of my videos. I'll say something like, yeah, sure, let's do it on a neutral platform. I'm not coming on your channel. But then it's painted as, she won't debate. She's scared of debating. And I think on one of his community posts, someone was like, now is she not debating, or is she not debating on your channel? And then he commented back, no, she won't debate. And I'm just holding on to that one because, baby, I've got the receipts to BTS blow that out of the water.
That's interesting. So my channel, I started my channel because I'm just kind of interested in this community in general. And because it's kind of, I think it's special, and I think it's fun. It's kind of like a sport to me. I see it, but it's a sport where both sides win, right? Because the flat earthers, they all think they won, and then the globe earthers, they all think they won too. And everyone loves it. There's no losers, there's no winners. It's just like, it's like sparring and all this stuff. But it's like an intellectual game, right? It's chess in a lot of ways. And people are always asking me, like, why do I get into this? And I have no answer for them other than that.
It's fun, and I think to your point, it's all, I guess, to your point, but adding a bit of for your consideration. There's a nefarious aspect to all of this, right? Because it's all fun and games when it's adults making adult decisions to believe this, that, or the other wacky thing. But then these adults have kids, or they interact with kids, and they impose those ideas onto these kids that eventually have to grow up and go out into the world and make their own way. And that's kind of scary. So it's almost, and you can't stop them from doing this, but what you can do is you can have conversations with these people and make the other person's audience, allow them to be exposed to an opposite opinion that they might not have otherwise sought out, and make it available for kids who someday, Google, is hydroplate legitimate? And then, maybe this video pops up that says, hey, no, here's all the reasons it's not.
And that's what I liked about your approach. You're very nice and congenial and gracious, and I think that's the way to go. Because when it's just the typical modern day dumpster fire, nobody's listening, right? It's just kind of psycho,
Yep. It's
confirmation bias and all that.
And the thing is like I can, there are a couple of people that bring out my sassy side, and I'm less nice. But usually, I hope it's evident that in those cases, I don't feel that I've thrown the first stone in relation to like being uncivil or rude or whatever. But I think there's a big difference between attacking an opinion and attacking a person. Like you can come out here and say, I think young Earth creationism is asinine. And most young Earth creationists would feel the same way about conventional science, conventional evolutionary theory. And I can meet that person in the middle and say, look, we both think that the other person's opinion is dumb or stupid or whatever. But let's have a conversation and try to figure out where the other person is coming from, because I can respect you as a person, even if I disagree with you or think you're wrong. And I think that you're totally right, that's the way that you make headway. And sometimes you make friends out of these people.
Oh, certainly. So I'm curious, what makes a person like you want to get into this scene and get down into the weeds with the rest of us here and arguing things like this?
It's a weird, that's a good question. It's a weird journey. When I was an undergrad, my plan was to become a veterinarian, professional. And I ended up taking a study abroad trip to Tanzania in a course titled, a summer course titled Ecology and Evolution in East Africa. And on that trip, I got incredible opportunity to see olduvai, pulled out some of the Homo habilis specimens, etc. I got to see chimpanzees in the wild. It was really cool. I decided I wanted to do an anthropology minor. So I picked up this anthropology minor in my undergraduate career, and my junior year, I ended up getting a job working at, or I guess this would have been the summer of my senior year. I got a job working at a veterinary clinic as a veterinarian. It was a normal gig. People tend to do this kind of thing if they're planning on being vets. And it was actually that job that made me decide I didn't want to be a vet. So I'm really glad I did it. One of my coworkers at this job in southern Indiana was a massive young Earth creationist, to the extent that he took trips to the Ark Encounter every year, went to the Creationism every year, Creation Museum every year, proselytized his opinion at work, like frequently. I didn't seek him out. He was up to me. Oh, you're animal science major. Well, did you know they found soft tissue in a Tyrannosaur skeleton? Okay. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it means the Earth can't be millions of years old. Well, first of all, the answer is billions, 4.5 to 4.8 billion years. But he kept bringing this stuff up over and over again, and he became a friend of mine. And so I was like, listen, I disagree with you on every single point that you've ever made on this topic. Do you want to get some coffee and talk about it? So for about a year, we got coffee once a month, and we would, for a couple hours at the coffee shop. And while I had these conversations with him, I realized that a lot of times I would say things and I wouldn't know why they were true. I would say something along the lines of like, well, obviously the Earth is billions of years old because radiometric dating tells us that this is so. Well, okay, how do you know that radiometric dating isn't wrong? Well, because all of the experts use it. But I couldn't at the time how it actually worked and why it was so solid. Now I know that this is grounded in a law of physics, the radioactive decay law. This isn't violatable. That breaking physics, it's so sound that the entire energy industry relies on it to pull up fossil fuels every year to power our cars and heat our homes. And as I was doing this, having these conversations with this guy, I realized that I was spending a ton of time doing research, and I didn't want anybody else to have to put that time in, also, because I'd already done all the work, and I had pages, not hundreds, but maybe 800 pages of research by the time this was all done. It was sourced and, I thought well articulated. And so I started an account on Reddit, on the debate evolution subreddit, and started getting active there. And I was like, hey, this is my story. Here's what I've done. Here's my opinion. Here's a post on radiometric dating. Here's one on the theropod to bird transition. Here's one on Egyptian chronology, which also dunks on young Earth creationism. And I was on Reddit for about a year doing that, doing posts, getting to know the community. I was pretty embedded in that community. And then I saw a lot of like Aaron Ra's videos, Tony Reed's videos, people who were making videos about creationism isn't legitimate in the slightest. And I thought, okay, well, I've got some good takes that no one's made on yet. I'll put them online. That'll make it even more accessible because, it's hard to find a debate evolution post. They're kind of hidden. I mean, some of them will pop up on your first Google search, but sometimes you really got to dig kind of deep. But YouTube videos that come up. Okay, I can editing that. So I'll just turn them into videos, and then people can have easy access to them. And then I got exposed to the debate scene, and I was like, okay, we can actually have these conversations and have them well moderated. And so I was like, who would I want to debate? And I was like, well, Kent Hovind is always saying, come and debate me. I could debate you with my brain time. He says, oh yeah, you really believe you and a mosquito are related? And I thought, yes, I would love to debate you, Kent. And I was living in London with my fiance at the time. And so I shot his secretary, Rhonda, who was awesome, an email. And I was like, hey, can I debate Kent Hovind? I'll do it on Modern Day Debate. And that was my first debate. And I've been doing little debates here and there ever since with different people who either seek me out or I just say anybody. And James sets me up with someone and we have a chat. And it's fortunate that I have a background in this enough that it gives me a little bit of authority, quote unquote, to talk about some of this stuff. I try not to talk out of my area too much, or if I do, I try to cite my sources. But assuming my thesis gets approved, I'm a primatologist. I know about primates, and thus I know about human evolution. So I can speak to that, and I can speak to tangential subjects like evolutionary biology or the radiometric dating aspects of paleontology, things like that. So it was happenstance is the short answer.
Wow, that's a crazy story. I mean, just to go from this one guy that I'm trying to convince, and then all of a sudden you're in front of an audience of thousands. That's pretty cool.
It's nice. It's fun. It was it's a happy accident. Let's say. I think very rarely do we do our best work when we intend to do so and set out doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you got all this paperwork that would just go to seed if you hadn't gotten it out there, right? I mean, you don't want to put all that work in for nothing.
Well, yeah, and the creationism scene and the debateism scene is relatively small on YouTube. So I've had the utmost pleasure of seeing some of my gripes pop up in the creationists' video late because they, I guess, consider them, in my opinion, appropriately.
Have you been on Whack an Atheist yet?
Oh no, I wish I had. Yeah, Kent has whacked me. Kent's never whacked me.
Wow.
But I will tell you that a factor sent Kent a whacking evolution kit or something like that, and included a top hat, a ball cap with a bunch of pins on it, like little buttons, so you can button onto your backpack or whatever. Faces on one of those pins. It was all the people Kent had debated, all Kent's greatest foes, I guess.
Wow.
So I'm on a button on Kent's hat in his closet in Dinosaur Adventureland somewhere.
That's kind of creepy, actually.
It's my claim to fame, I know.
Yeah, it's a goal of all of ours to get on Whack an Atheist. I mean, that would really, you've made it at that point,
I know, and I've debated, 1-800-BIG-DINO himself, but I haven't been on Whack an Atheist. I think it's because I don't consider myself to be an atheist. I brand myself, I guess, if you will, as an agnostic, because the opinion that I hold. I don't know that we can make claims about the metaphysical. I'm not sure. And so I sit myself at the agnostic table. So I wonder if maybe that's it. I'm gonna hold that in my head as
I'm sure you're in the sights at some point. He's got a bullet in the chamber for you at some point. I'm sure.
I hope.
You keep poking.
Yeah, I need to make more Kent videos. I actually don't think I have any Kent videos.
I'll share with you. I'm pretty new to this whole evolution thing. I was pastoring at a pretty evangelical church not more than probably 5 years ago.
Oh wow,
And
that's recent.
the last sermon I gave was on evolution
Really?
and its follies, yeah. And
Oh,
but even then it had start to come, my faith was starting to crumble. But
so
I gave this sermon, and actually you can, in my one of my 3 pieces of content on my channel, I reviewed that sermon live back
oh
and
wow.
and went over it. It was pretty interesting. But
So
Kent was one of the last, like, people that I kind of cling to, like, and I remember thinking in my mind, if it wasn't for Kent, I would have given this whole thing up, because he was the only one that was really,
mm,
loud about holding
yeah,
on to it, and the arguments really kind of made sense to my brain at the time, like I can't observe it. And but eventually, I think one of the final nails in the coffin was when I saw that little creepy chicken wings on Aaron Raw's emu.
yeah,
Like, seriously, I was very disturbed by that.
yeah. Very, very odd. It's interesting, because I think you're right. I think the arguments that Kent and that a lot of younger creationists make, they make sense intuitively. If you don't have a background in this stuff, or you don't see it as necessary to kind of dig into it, which a lot of people don't. It's just not important to them, and so they don't look into it. And that's fine. That's their prerogative to do. I think the problem comes with the folks who are vocally saying that sports young Earth creationism. For me, at least, I don't so much have an issue with the people who are young Earth creationists on faith alone. Uh, it's when they start saying it's a conspiracy and science actually supports young Earth creationism. Uh, but I don't shame anybody, or I don't think anyone should take flack for kind of buying into the stuff that Kent Hovind puts out, because it does seem to make sense on the face of it, right? It's not until you get into the weeds that you start to see the issues.
And it's very similar to believing in the flat Earth in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, I'm looking out, it looks
Yeah.
flat, I don't feel like I'm moving,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it's the same, right? It doesn't. I guess they could say, we're looking around and it looks like everything's created and everything looks like it has a purpose. So of course it does, right? Those seem to me to be just completely analogous.
I think you're right, and I think that yeah, I think science and reality tends to have this expectation that it will be intuitive, that you can trust your senses, but that's simply not the case. And you can find examples like you said with flat Earth. You could talk about it with disease. Lots of people are quite ill without even feeling sick, and then all of a sudden they've got cancer. It's like if the senses are what you're relying on for your truth claims, you're going to have a lot of issues down the road. And that's kind of the point of science and medicine in general, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
to elucidate these areas that are outside of our senses.
Mm. I remember a sermon. We have a guy at our on staff that's a professional commercial pilot, and he did this sermon on trusting your tools, because
Hmm.
they got all this training. When you're flying, sometimes you could get yourself into big trouble because your senses are telling you you're flying straight, but you're actually like this or this or
Right,
this,
right,
and so you could get into big trouble. All of a sudden, your equilibrium's off or whatever, and you got to look at your whatever. It doesn't matter what you're feeling or thinking. You look at your tools, and if your tools are telling you you're not level, then you're not level. So I think it's in there in the mind of I think it's even in the theology a lot of the times. The heart is deceitful above all things, and there's verses about this kind of thing. That you don't trust your senses, right? You trust your tools, you trust God, you trust. A lot of times they say we trust science because they give us medicine and things like this,
mm,
but it's just this one area that, especially this brand of Christian, kind of holds out on, right? Because it threatens their already preconceived ideas.
yeah, yeah. I think that there's an interesting kind of conflict that I think young Earth creationism meet. It's this idea of man versus God's word, and that's always tickled me quite a bit, because like this is one interpretation of the Bible, right? Of Genesis. and it's not even the majority interpretation. You know, you look at the Catholic Church, you look at mainstream Protestants here in the United States, even, and the majority of people have no issues with the age of the Earth or evolution. The majority of them find ways to make it work. Or, you know, if you really want to get into the kind of thick of it, you could look at what biblical scholars say, which is that this is exalted, right? It's not meant to be totally. It never is.
Right.
And I think that's a valid stance to have. It might even be the correct interpretation. I think it's so funny when the creationists are out here like, yeah, you know, we take the straight reading. We read it plain. You don't need a biblical scholar to interpret the Bible, right? And that always kind of makes me laugh because it's like you're reading it in English. It wasn't written in English. You can't understand what it really says, right? First of all, unless you understand what it's saying in the Hebrew, but more importantly, what the Hebrew culture was at the time, which is the lens by which you have to understand every ancient text, is the culture in which it was written. So you know what they mean when they say certain stuff, right? Like if a person thousands of years in the future found a human writing from today and they read, you know, this statement, I woke up on cats and dogs outside, and then they started saying, yeah, these ancient people believed that it was raining cats and dogs when it was, you know, a horrible storm. It's like, no, it's an expression. It's understood in the context of our culture, right? So I tend to think the young earth Christians are in their theology and in their science. And I have a lot of respect for a lot of the kind of theistic evolutionists, evolution creationists out there who do great science and they're religious too. I think those two things can mesh.
And that transitions perfectly into my next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel like this is where I'm at in my journey. Is I'm trying to kind of synthesize all the things I've been learning over the last couple years, and in a lot of people's deconstruction from, you know, really conservative hyper evangelicalism, you tend to, just like the Mormons, like if you decide this isn't for me, you kind of throw everything out, right? But my journey's been a little more subtle, and I've been able to keep on hold of things. So right now I'm identifying myself as a Christian naturalist. You ever heard of that?
I believe before the end of his life, Darwin considered him a Christian naturalist.
Oh, interesting. Well, okay, so I'm going to be very nuanced about this, because to me, when it's becoming more and more jarring when I hear people like Kent Hovind say they're a Christian, because to me, Jesus wasn't concerned at all about the age of the earth or about science or anything like this. And even Paul, like if you're talking about Paul, these things are kind of becoming more and more not connected. Like if you were going to say, okay, we're going to go back in time, we're going to talk to Adam, right? If Adam was a real human person, what kind of theology would he have? Okay, now we're going to go fast forward. Abraham. Now, did he have the same beliefs as Adam? Probably not. Okay, now we're going to go to, you know, Jesus, right? Wildly different time, wildly different theology, even in the scriptures. Now we're going to go to Paul. Same thing. We've introduced things. We've gotten rid of things. It's a whole new world. But we kind of, you know, they kind of want to cram them all in like they're 21st century Christians, right? This thing is so wide and so big. It to me is so hard to synthesize all these things. But when I say I'm a Christian, I want to say that I think that the way that Jesus taught humans to exist in the world might be one of the ways that's going to bring about flourishing and bring about peace in the world. And I'm curious, because this is the thing that I'm trying to get in this community to bring, because I don't see this a lot when you're having debates with theists and evolutionists or atheists or whatever. And you're not one of these people, but some of these kind of meaner atheists will say, oh, these are just goat herding, Bronze Age, whatever. But to me, reading the literature and reading the experts on these things, even people like Paul were very educated and very political people. And this is kind of clumsy, but I just this is tragic, but I just had an interview with a guy that wrote a really long trilogy on Paul, and I recorded the whole thing and then lost it all. So I have
Oh,
no proof of this.
oh,
But I asked him, what's a modern day equivalent to Paul in his day? And he said it's the Black Panther guy. So
oh, Malcolm X.
well, yeah, he also said Malcolm X, but he was talking about Chairman Fred Hampton.
Oh, right. Okay.
And Fred Hampton, I think this is a great analogy. I mean, if you're going to build, so people have taken this thing that Paul's done and built this religion around it, right? But I think it's more hopeful, and this is what this trilogy of books is trying to get at, is that Paul is doing this kind of political thing where he's under the oppression of Rome, and he's trying to keep his community safe from the death-dealing nature of Rome. Because there's all these things like, the Roman cult of the empire and death and killing and keeping people down and keeping everyone in their place. And there's, patriarchal hierarchies that they're trying to undo. There's also obviously the huge wealth gap in this time, and just tons of suffering and a lot of the same things that Chairman Fred was dealing with. And so this guy Paul, he's using these things. He's seeing what Jesus has said and taught, and he's using these to keep people's faith alive under the foot of the empire. And I think when you put it like that, I think everyone can agree with that, because everyone agrees that somebody like Fred was doing a good thing. He's trying to keep his community intact and not lose hope, even though they're being discriminated against and oppressed. And there's a lot of literature out there that says Paul was doing that very same thing. Have you ever heard anything like that?
I haven't. I would tend to agree with it. I think mostly what I've heard that kind of falls in line with what you're saying is there are a lot of people out there who discuss the nature of Jesus, right? And they say, and I would tend to agree with this. I mean, Jesus said awesome stuff. I agree with, like, I can't think of anything that he's really said that I would disagree with. I mean, I don't even think he ever said anything particularly homophobic or anything like that. I think he's attributed to saying some stuff, but I don't think that it's necessarily clocked academically. And so I think just quite good. This whole idea of being kind to your neighbor, treating them as you would want to be treated, the golden rule, and for the meek, and look out for the downtrodden in your society, pick them up, uplift them, help them. And I like that. I could get behind that. I think it was Gandhi who actually said it. He was like, I like Christianity. I might have been a Christian if it weren't for the Christians.
Mhm.
It's like, that kind of makes sense. There are people out here who Jesus has said, and they warp it into something that it isn't, or worse, they just ignore it and base their, they use the Bible or Christianity as this figurehead to put their religious ideas behind, but they're really about what their book says.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks. That sucks, because I think there's some good stuff in there,
Yeah, and it's even in these books that this guy wrote. He was saying that you can actually trace through the Old or the New Testament where the Paulinists, the loyalists, even the Christians, this theology of sharing together, not participating in the ways of empire, start to diminish, and they start to integrate into the society and start losing a lot of these things that are keeping them separate and keeping them in the way of Jesus. And a lot of these things start to creep in, like more and more, gender inequality, and more things like even wealth gaps, and these rich people start to come in and get things kind of messed up. And it seems to be incumbent upon me to bring this kind of more. It's even in the academia. I guess this stuff is just taken for granted, that Paul was very radical in his day, Jesus was very radical in his day, and we got it. And I think this is I try to get like SFT on this, but I can't get a hold of this guy. It's funny. I've only been able to get the atheists on, but I think I'd love to see somebody like me take this approach in a debate with somebody that's like a radical Christian, young Earth creationist or something like that. Because Jesus and the Old Testament, they're not interested in the science at all. They're interested in what kind of systems of oppression are happening in our day that are keeping people, like I said, under the boot of empire, right? Like even whoever wrote Genesis, they're looking at the other creation stories, and they're full of violence, they're full of death, and they're full of hate,
They're
right?
coming out of the Babylonian captivity. They're good about these, oppressive, adjacent societies that they've just been captured by, and they've finally gotten loose. And you can draw those lines easily.
Yes.
Those ancient Near Eastern texts map onto each other quite well.
Right.
Which is the reason why the scholars understand this. They know the culture. They know what a polemic is, which contemporary Earth creationists simply don't. You might try to get a hold of Praise. Praise would debate you on this.
Really? What's his thing? Praise I Am or whatever it is? Yeah,
You could reach out to James. James could probably get you on MDD with Praise on that
I
topic.
would love to try that sometime. And there's a couple. I'm actually going through a Bible study right now, like it's on a Zoom class, and it's such a tiny group of people that they're kind of in the lines of like Catholic workers and anarchists. I mean, they're a really small group of people that are using, especially the book of Mark, that are using the things that Jesus has said to equip them to go out and do real good work. Right? I mean, and isn't that much more of a better thing? Doesn't that seem like much more consistent with what Jesus said and did than for somebody to go out and like start attacking the scientific community for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at the father of Protestantism, right? Like Martin was that kind of guy. He's comes out and he's like, I think the way that the church is being oppressive right now is really messed up. And then he goes to the church and he nails his issues with the church on the door. He lives in hiding for a lot of his life. He distributes the Bible because he wants everyone to have access to this, this word that's essentially having to be filtered through the elite of the society. And I think we need to see a return to form with that kind of attitude for like, okay, a lot of the religions of the world, they claim in their books to be there for the poor and the weak and the widowed and the orphaned, and yet it's not been about that for centuries here in the West, which sucks. That's horrible. And I think you're totally right. A person who would be really great to talk to from like the evolutionary creation side and like figuring out how to mobilize kind of a better form of Christianity would be Sygart.
I've heard of him,
and I'm sure he'd be willing to come on and have a chat about this. He's awesome. I think he's a great guy.
Is he? Okay, yeah. I've seen a lot of his stuff. I didn't think to reach out to him.
Orange channel, Oren Raw's channel, and they've palled around it. They're buddies. I mean, and Sai is fully religious.
Raw and Sai?
Oren Raw and Sai, yeah, they're friends.
Oh, they're friends, huh? I did not know that.
Yep.
I've noticed that Aaron's not done very many debates recently.
No, I don't think he tends to do very many of them. Of course, he's debated everybody on the scene.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
made the rounds.
Yeah, and he's been around for a long time, and he, more than anyone, could probably tell you, and I've only been doing this for 3-ish years, but I'm sure Oren and I, actually, we've had this conversation. We've talked about this. But the arguments don't change from the other traditionists. They circulate, and then they maybe go around for a little bit, and they pop back up a few years later. And you're like, oh, hey, I remember when they were saying this 3 years ago. Here's the response that still holds,
Right.
But yeah, as far as like the epitome of like really good Christianity. I think Sygart represents it very well. He's a ultimately very kind person.
He's not a precept, is he?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I thought
Um,
I've heard people say that, but maybe not.
maybe I couldn't tell you honestly. I wish I had the answer. I know. Oh, actually, I don't know this either. Rob from Sentinel Apologetics. He's another guy who's theistic evolution, very chill with science, and a very cool guy from what I've seen. I don't think he's pre-sub, but you could reach out. Both of them would be great people to have on and talk
And
with.
what's the last one you said? Rog?
Rob, R-O-B.
Oh,
Rob. Yeah.
Rob.
Rob,
What's his
Sentinel,
channel?
Sentinel Apologetics.
Oh, okay. I'll check that out for sure.
He's good. I've seen some of his stuff, and I might Christian, but I can enjoy the theology as much as what I've seen from him is very good. It's quite good.
Right.
I'm trying to think who else is Inspiring Philosophy, IP.
Yeah, I've reached out to him. Haven't heard back.
He's hard to get a hold of because he's a lot of like he's done like TEDx and stuff like that. He's a pretty big guy. But he might get back to you. I hope he does.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just starting out, so I'm just reaching out to anyone I can. But it's been really fun so far, and I just think it seems like in these debate things they're so polarized. I think that this thing that we call Christianity is not meant to create the us versus them. It's supposed to create and to expose the real problems underneath what this thing, because to me, I'm seeing, especially and it's really unfortunate in the Christian community, this nationalism that is just ripping this world apart. I mean, the environmental issues and even the national issues between nations. I mean, it's really destructive.
I don't understand too. I mean, I think there's been a really, really unfortunately well done PR campaign by the GOPers who are backed by big oil because you want to talk about like what the Bible espouses to being a good steward of the planet, and it's like right there at the very beginning, it's like you have to be a good steward of this earth. You've got to take care of it if you expect it to give back to you. It's like right there, and I don't understand how they've managed to this
is what the empire does though, is they don't want to make it about we have to do something. They want to make it about a mental assent because that's what keeps the money coming. That's what makes people not have to change their lives. If you just want to go, well, okay, I want to make all the money I can. Well, that comes at a cost of the environment, resources, slavery and all these things. But if you make the religion about just a mental assent and about paying your tithes and about showing up, then the rich people can show up and do it. The church can make money and nobody has to change a thing, right? So you can see that, and this is what the Bible is pointing out in so many of the time. I mean, even the minor prophets, they point at this all the time. They say, you people are sitting, and they even use, it's anachronistic, but they say you're sitting on your couches when the orphan and the widow are out here dying, and it's Israel's job to be the people through whom God's blessing comes to the world, right? And we've just failed at it over and over and over. And Jesus shows up and does the same thing.
Yeah, the whole message is to help others, I think, ultimately, help others as you would want to be helped in your time of need. And I think that the evangelical right in this kind of just fallen in love with the, God wants you to help yourself, right? When it's like, okay, and he wants you to help others, right? Like he wants everyone to band together. That's like the message. Help everyone who needs it, so that lest when you're in trouble, you don't receive that same benefit. So I think you're right. I think that that's a huge fix that needs to go down. It's horribly sad. I think the direction that it's gone. I don't think it's indicative at all, at least from part of the Bible.
And I'm glad that we can agree, because when I'm watching these debates, it's just tragic to me to see people take these scriptures that I love so much and just make them about anti-science and anti-people in a lot of ways, and and then but then it also is discouraging on the other side to see the atheists not appreciate the polemic of these scriptures. I think that we need to see them as a human project. It's not a religious jihad, right? These are oppressed communities of people that are marginalized and being destroyed, and they're doing everything they can to do what they feel like God has called them to do, to maintain their life, because culture, living as a poor person in Rome was just terrible, horrible. I mean, people getting crucified around you. I mean, the wealth disparities and the jobs were horrible, and they
Yeah,
used these messages of Jesus to keep them from dying. These are life and death things.
I'm with you. I don't like the yeah, I'm not a fan of the style of atheism that tends to say everything, like the Bible is trash, everything in it is horrible, throw it out. Because I don't think that that's even close to the case. There's the Bible is human. That's what it is. It's ultimately quite gray in a lot of places. Find me a holy book that isn't, or a book that isn't. That's just how humans. That's how humans are. But because it's gray, that there are some really choice parts in there, and in my opinion, a lot of that comes from what the stuff that Jesus has to say, right? It's all about like helping others. I mean, I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse with that, but I really do that holds.
And that's something we can all agree on. And I think
I can agree with you for sure.
I think I don't know anyone that you could find that say, isn't the Bible trying to make the world a better place? Isn't it trying to bring heaven on earth? I mean, isn't that the idea? Isn't that what Jesus is trying to do? I don't see any way to disagree with that. And I think it's just, I feel like I want to bring this message that we need to unite and to see that we are all trying to find out what it is to be human and what it means to expose these systems of oppression that are keeping even in this world that we live in, we still have all these racism problems, we still have all these wage disparities, and I think that the answer is going to, because history keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me. I think that the things that Jesus is pointing at, they're not just like, okay, if you listen to this, you'll go to heaven. That has nothing to do with it. In the literature that I've read, it's zero. I mean, it's not about going somewhere else. It's about changing the world that we live in. And it actually, in a lot of ways, it's positing a new way of political economic distribution, like a jubilee thing. And we don't have to get into all of that, but I think that we just need to, on both sides of this thing, we need to see that this is a very human thing and that we're no different. Like this thing that I was talking about earlier, the Christian nationalism. We need to see that this nation that we live in, America, is just the same as Rome. It's just the same. We use the same symbology, the eagle and the pillars, and look at the White House. I mean, it's Roman, right? And where the politics are almost the same. And it's just amazing to me that Jesus lived in this time, and he was so anti-empire. He was so anti even the religious establishment. And then we come to today, and we have Christians claiming to be followers of Jesus that are pro-empire, like America, right? And all that entails. And then also pro exactly what the Sadducees and the Pharisees were, just the religious hierarchy involved around money and involved around keeping people in their place, and it's us versus them.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I hope that this is a niche that you can fill and kind of draw attention to. I think that'd be great.
And that's that. I really want to get that out there and see how that. And then just before we close, we got like 10 minutes left. I want to throw something really radical at you and just see what you think.
Okay.
So you remember Julian Smith?
Julian Smith, refresh my memory.
He was one of the first YouTubers to hit it big, and he was actually, I think, a Christian kid that did like sketch humor.
Okay.
And then eventually he kind of deconstructed, and now he's just gone forever. I don't know where he is, but he's probably farming somewhere with his family, you know. But he, at the very end of it, he started a podcast called Spellbound. You can actually, if anyone's not heard of Julian Smith, go watch his sketches on his channel. They're hilarious. But he had this guy on named John Zerzan. Have you ever heard of this guy? John
No.
Zerzan? So
No.
he identifies as a green anarchist. And his thing was like anti-tech, anti-civilization, and the way have you heard of this kind of thing?
Yeah, I've heard of this.
And
I didn't know it under that label, but I have heard of this.
And the way that this snuck into my mind was I was kind of formulating like anti evolution arguments. This is when I was kind of on the creationist side.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm listening to all these debates, and they're always talking about, well, science gives us this and science gives us that and all this stuff. And I started to think to myself, well, what's so good about science? Because science, you know, these are the arguments I'm forming against somebody like you, right?
Yeah.
Well, science makes guns and nukes and science. What are some other things I say? Well, you know, science doesn't always do good things.
Yeah.
And then when I hear this John Zerzan guy saying that that humans have evolved to be in tribes, small tribes, and that all the problems of the modern world are a symptom of civilization because there's too many of us. We don't know how to interact with each other anymore. There's a lot of social issues. There's a lot of technological issues, you know, just having a screen in front of your face all the time. What it's doing to our monkey ape brains, right? And I didn't like any of that, obviously, but the part of like anti-technology really kind of gripped me. And I've been kind of tinkering with this idea and thinking, if it's true that the model of common ancestry is true, and that this brain that I have in my skull, it's adapted to live in a tribe of a 40 or 100 or whatever, and it's adapted to eat certain things, not the food that the empire feeds us, right? That we create. It's adapted to, you know, whatever it is. What does that say? And that's kind of I'm trying to synthesize this with my Christian Jesus views of anti-empire, anti things like this. You know, what do you think about that in general?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, so Robin Dunbar is the guy who proposed Dunbar's number, so the ideal number of relationships that a human can hold without overstressing themselves. And there's some controversy over that, but I think it can generally be accepted that there's a limit to how many interactions a human can maintain and relationships a human can maintain before you start to stress yourself out. Stuff starts to slip through the cracks, right? And certainly, you can say, I think, that a lot of the mental anguish that we experience today, and a lot of the physical anguish from sitting in desks all day to the pollution that we breathe, you know, it can be owed to modern society. That being said, I would keep in mind that the merits of the modern world and the merits of being able to communicate at the press of a button is what's led to essentially all modern medicine, which I would say is a massive net good as far as reducing suffering goes. You know, back in the day, your child breaks a leg, and yes, you pull him around with you when you guys are nomadically moving from spot to spot, but he's in misery this entire time while he's waiting for his leg to heal. So there are certainly benefits to living in the modern society that we live in. I think there's got to be a way to mitigate the negatives and make positives.
Mm-hmm.
What that looks like, I don't know. Whether it's reducing, interactions to community levels, unless it involves, your work or your job or whatever. But indeed, we have to do something about the environment that we live in. And I don't just mean things like pollution, the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, but even the local environments that we live in, right? People who, whether you're living in a cramped city area with not much vegetation, or whether you live out in a rural area where you don't have many connections with other people, like you said, we're a social species that used to roam the savannah or the steppes or the deserts or what have you. I mean, we're used to being up and walking and communicating with one another. There's got to be some kind of way to synthesize benefits of the modern world with the world that we evolved to live in, because our brains and our technology have far outpaced the bodies that we dwell in. We're ruining our bodies. Most of us are ruining our bodies with the lifestyles that we lead, and those lifestyles are a symptom of modern society. So I think you make some good points, and I think that there is certainly something to simpler living. But I don't think you have to give up all the benefits of the modern world to reap some of the benefits of the past, if that makes sense.
And I've talked to a couple people about this, and it seems like it's an inevitable phase of the human evolution because we have such advanced language capabilities, and we have hands, right, with posable thumbs and things for tools. And the theory that the guy John Zerzan is kind of positing is that if you're put in religious language, the fall of man, the original sin was domestication, because once you start using nature for your own benefit, all of a sudden things like private property come into it, and then there's a lot more resources, and then all of a sudden hierarchies develop. Well, who's going to be in charge of the thing, right? And this seems to me to be there could be something to this, in terms of, because what happens is all of a sudden you have 8 billion people, right? And
I have to pause you. You need to read this. You need to read this book, Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind.
I've heard a lot of good things about that.
This covers precisely what you're talking about. Harari here, he actually calls the agricultural revolution like the greatest scam of mankind, because it's talking about exactly what you just mentioned. That sedentary lifestyle, when we start to sit around and grow and expect crops, that's when we went to a nomadic lifestyle where everyone owned everything and no one was really the leader, to these hierarchies and, putting yourself at risk of every bad thing that essentially society can and did bring about. You'd really like this book. It's like right up your alley.
I'm definitely gonna have to get a copy of that because people keep telling me about that.
Well, it's precisely what is why it's so apt, I think.
I actually got a Jeopardy question right that nobody else on the contestants got, because the question was something like, it basically was, what does sapien mean? Or what is, it was like something like, Homo sapien, what does sapien mean? And I said, wise. And nobody else got it. Isn't that what it means, right?
Yep. Homo man, sapiens wise man.
Is that what does homo mean?
Man.
Oh, man?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So wise man or whatever.
Sapiens is wise. Yeah, it's like Homo erectus, upright man, right? Like
I
Homo
see. Okay.
Man.
I thought homo had to do with like one, like homogeneous.
Yeah, in a chemical sense, it means same, right? So
same.
It's like, right. So homogeneous, same mixture, homozygous. Same.
What about homogenized?
Homogenized, same mixture. Maybe?
Same milk.
Same milk. I don't know.
I'm interested in etymologies of words, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Latin nomenclature, I believe it's man.
One last question. So, is it possible to have 8 billion people on the earth? Is that how many there are? 8-ish?
If that's not where we're at, we're getting there fast.
Is it possible to have 8 billion people and to not harm the biosphere and other animals' ways of life?
It's possible to reduce it. We're at a bad level right now, as I'm sure you know. Deforestation, pollution, the acidification of the ocean. We're just wreaking havoc on the ocean's pH, and on rocks. We can't continue at the rate we're going. It is possible, in my opinion, for 8 billion people to improve our living situation, and our population will eventually start going down as quality of life goes up. This is an inevitable relationship that we see in every developed nation. The higher the quality of life, the less children people tend to have, and if everybody has 2 or less, right, from here moving forward, then the population will start to eventually decline, and we can improve the quality of life of everyone simultaneously and not raise the environment we live in. We could improve it. We could harm it way less. Could we ever do no harm? I don't know, because I think inevitably, by being a part of nature, you have to kind of harm it. Unfortunately,
Certainly, got to eat it at least.
Yeah, exactly right. But we could reach a point where we are kind of in we're kind of in this like a symbiotic relationship with the world around us. If we could find some way to mitigate our carbon footprint as a species, I think I think we could get there, especially if everyone put their heads together. I mean, we've seen in the past year that when the world's scientists actually get together for a common goal, I mean, we got the vaccine for a brand new disease in less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
It can happen. It can happen, and whether it's doing things like algae solar panels to actually re-sequester carbon in the atmosphere back into the earth, or whether it's actual sequestering plants, or feeding our cattle and our livestock something that doesn't cause as high methane emissions like seaweed, or doing ocean top wind farms or whatever. There's ways to do this. The problem is our focus isn't there. The people who have the money, the elite, if you will, they don't care enough. But we could do it, I think.
All right. I have you on record.
I could be wrong.
Who knows though, right? I mean, this is all. It just seems to me an experiment. It's so early in the history of man and civilization. I mean, it's been what?
I mean,
200 years or whatever, 1,000 years. Maybe.
Yeah. Our species
Modern.
For 300,000 years, and anatomically modern has been for 150,000, something like that.
What about civilization? It's been around for how many thousand years? You think?
10, maybe 15.
I mean, we're just
It's nothing.
we're just beginning to understand what we are capable of.
A total blip. I mean, and that's the thing. We're either going to be, if aliens exist and come to the planet in, 1 billion years, and we have not managed to sort ourselves out, will be reduced to a small blip in the geologic column, and they'll probably call it like the coal age or something because we burned it all up. And then eventually we'll go extinct, and the world will. Yeah, this is the kind of existential dread easer that I think of when people are like, "Oh my God, we're killing the planet." It's like, okay, but the planet. George Carlin was famous for this, right? It's like we're not killing the planet. The planet is going to be fine. The planet bounced back after the Permian when 96% of life went extinct. We're a bad cold, right? And we'll take ourselves out long before we take the planet out. So,
right.
And then the planet will rebound. So, I mean, that's comforting to some and doom filling for others.
Yeah, I mean, most of us just want to, eat ice cream and watch Netflix.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can live a good, simple life here on Earth, and as long as you leave some part of it better than when you found it, I think that's a good life.
Well, that's a good place to end it. Thanks, Erika. I really appreciate it. Getting your brain on here. Keep doing the good work.
Hey, I had a great time, and you too. If you need help getting in contact with anyone who you're trying to debate or whatever, I'll help in any way I can.
Wow, you're sweet.
No problem.
All right, well, thanks.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You have left the room. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm got another conversation with I'm terrible. With another guy next week. He's the guy from I think something theology. He's a New Zealander. He's an electrician like me, and we're gonna hash it out next week. Thanks again, y'all.